What's up, Canadian gun enthusiasts? Welcome to the Ballistically Speaking review of the Kodiak Defense WK-180C Gen 2 rifle. I've got a lot to say about this rifle, so stick with me and I'll try to make it worth your while. Since its inception in 2018 as a collaboration between Wolverine Supplies and Kodiak Defense, the 180C has had an interesting and dynamic history. Originally being released as a Canadian non-restricted semi-automatic 223 Wild rifle for under $1,000, the 180C has had everyone's attention since the beginning. It's gone through a lot of changes since then, both to the rifle itself and behind the scenes, including the end of the relationship between Kodiak and Wolverine, the birth of Spectre Limited and its competitor product, the MCR, a caliber change from its original 223 Wild to 5.56 NATO, significant price increases, and a lot of smaller changes and upgrades. The 180C has also, arguably, garnered the most aftermarket support of the 180 series in Canada, especially with companies like True North Arms creating innumerable upgrades and aftermarket parts specifically for the 180C. Now, about 4 years after its original release, Kodiak has released a redesigned and significantly upgraded model, simply called the WK-180C Gen 2. We've been following the Gen 2 since its announcement at SHOT Show in early 2022, and we've been playing with one since it was released a few months later. First, let's look at the features of the rifle, what I like about it, and then, as always, what I don't like. First, here's what I like about the redesign of the WK-180C Gen 2. The first thing is the bolt hold open. Originally, the Gen 1 didn't have a bolt hold open. You had to insert a magazine to hold the bolt open. The Gen 2 came with this lever. The Gen 1, eventually they released an aftermarket lever for it. It was designed a little differently. It's in a bit of a C shape. This one is supposed to be facing towards the back of the rifle. I've inverted it 180 degrees. It does cover the serial number, but that's a pretty easy thing to get by if you ever do need somebody to be able to see the serial number. In the meantime, I find it a lot easier to manipulate. So if I need to open, when it was here, it was easy to hold open. You just use your thumb, you'd pull the charging handle back, you'd lift your thumb, that would push up on the lever, and then you'd be able to hold the bolt open. In this position, I can run the bolt back, and I just push, I don't know if you guys can see this, but I just push up with my thumb and then release, and then it does the exact same thing. So why would I need to use this thumb, a support thumb, instead of my trigger hand thumb? Well, I don't. But if I need to release the bolt, reaching all the way back here was a real pain. And this is more where a standard bolt release would be in other models of rifle. And I find it really easy just to push down on that and lock the bolt in place. And I find using the thumb, the support thumb, very easy, regardless of whether you have it in its factory position facing backwards, or if you invert it and have it facing forwards. I think the addition of this bolt hold open was a great addition to the Gen 2. Secondly, you just saw it in action. It's a non-reciprocating charging handle. A big problem with the Gen 1, or at least from the customer standpoint, a lot of people's complaints about the Gen 1 was that the charging handle, when it was fixed to the bolt, was riding on aluminum. It itself was steel. It was causing a lot of wear and a lot of problems. That's obviously fixed with the non-reciprocating handle. Now, I've heard a lot of people saying that the lock at the front is going to wear out. I don't think so. I can take this apart and show you guys a little bit later, but it's running on a ball bearing that just sits into this little insert here, and it works really good. And at this point, I've put north of 1,500 rounds through this, which isn't, a mountain amount, and it's wearing the finish, but it's not wearing the aluminum at all. And it's a very positive click in there, and it seems to work well. I'm not worried about it wearing prematurely. Other people are, to each their own. Third is the lower parts kit, where it now takes standard AR lower parts kits. And the big reason that that's important is, number one, your trigger pins. You don't have to use a proprietary trigger pin anymore. You can use a standard safety, and most importantly, you have standard captive takedown and pivot pins here and here. Now, while we're on the subject, this pivot pin is new to the Gen 2. The Gen 1 didn't have it. The Gen 1 had a lot of issues with wobble and space between the upper and the lower receiver. That's been completely eliminated. That is absolutely solid. There's no movement in it whatsoever. And it just works well. Now, the only thing that's a little bit different is typically the head of this pivot pin is on the opposite side with other types of rifles. It's on the charging handle side here. I don't think that's an issue. And it's been wonderful, and it's solid. When you open this up, and I'll open it up a little bit later, but the post that the pivot pin is going through in the upper receiver, you used to be able to get like a little rubber ring to insert, to slide around that post and then kind of fill the gap. You had to squish it down and really, you know, fit the upper to the lower to eliminate that slop. And you still had a lot of gap between the two in the old one. There's like no gap. Anyway, just a great addition. You can use beaver tail grips now as well in the Gen 2 compared to the Gen 1. I thought that was a great option. And as always, you can still put whatever trigger you want to put in there. It has an extended handguard. The original Gen 1 handguard, I think it was like a 13-inch handguard or something like that. It was all tapered. Honestly, it looked a little bit funny with the big 18.5-inch barrel that we have to have on here. This is a 15-inch handguard, extends obviously a little further out. I think it looks much better on the rifle. It's M-LOK all around. The old one had some QD cups integrated into it. This one doesn't. I don't think that matters. With the M-LOK, you can add a QD wherever you want. You can see I've added a pick rail on the bottom here. It is still a little bit proprietary in that the port is open here for venting gas for the gas system, but you don't have to use their handguard. It is compatible with the AR-15 handguards. You just have to be aware that your spacing for this gas block might be a little bit, you know, some handguards, low profile AR-15 handguards just won't work. The factory handguard, I think, is much better on the Generation 2. It has reasonable accuracy out of the box. As far as I can tell, this is the same barrel as the Gen 1 came with, or at least the later generation Gen 1 rifles. However, as far as I know, it's the same bolt carrier and same bolt as well. However, in my original Gen 1 that I had prior to this rifle, I was expecting 2 to 2.5 MOA. I was getting 2 to 2.5 MOA out of that rifle. With this rifle, with certain types of ammo, I have been able to shoot well under 2-inch groups, and you know, getting closer to those, you know, 1-inch groups. And I've done an accuracy video before. If you guys want to see a full accuracy test with this rifle, you can see that on our channel. But I think that the rifle is more than accurate enough for what you're going to be using it for straight out of the box, which is great. The mil-spec trigger isn't terrible. Now, I've got a trigger tech in here right now, but I did the majority of my testing with the factory trigger. It is just a mil-spec trigger. It's got a little bit of creep in it. It's got a heavy brake, maybe in that like 7.5 pound range, something like that. It had a very positive reset, a little bit of, you know, creep on it, a little bit sloppy, but really not that bad as mil-spec triggers can go. Swapping it out with a Trigger Tech trigger, this is a Trigger Tech Combat, and it has been absolutely crazy good. Obviously, I've also replaced the handguard on it. The factory handguard is your standard mil-spec AR handguard, which you can see right here. Nothing to write home about, but nothing to be concerned about either. It gets the job done. It comes with a lot of off-brand furniture. I think people call it Magpal. It's obviously knockoff Magpul furniture. This is a Magpul CTR fixed stock. I want a fixed stock. I've got a beard. I hate getting my beard hairs caught in these carbine adjustable stocks. It does come with just a regular off-brand carbine stock that is adjustable. And you know what? It's not Magpul, but it works just fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And the AR-15 grip that it comes with, you know, it's off-brand as well. But again, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. as a fact, coming from a factory rifle, I think it's just fine. It's reliable. The Gen 1 was also reliable. The Gen 2 is just as reliable, as long as the parts don't break. I'll get into it when I get into the negatives about this rifle, but if the parts are not broken or not breaking or they're all intact, then the rifle can be very reliable. And I think there are a lot of things that can be done, just, paying attention to your rifle, doing your proper maintenance to ensure that you don't get a lot of parts breakage. And as long as you're doing that, it might take a little bit more work. You might have to, check it out every once in a while, or a little bit more than maybe you would otherwise, to make sure that everything is running smoothly on it. But that's not a major issue, I don't think. And if you do that, this will be a very reliable rifle for you. At this point, we're seeing people with even the Gen 1 rifles going into that 5, 6, 7, 8,000 round marker, and they're doing just fine. This one's got 1,500 rounds through it. I did have a piston breakage somewhere in that 700 to 900 round range. And I learned a little bit more about how to, take care of the gas system. I haven't had a breakage since then. I've put at least as many rounds since the breakage as I had prior to the breakage, and I've had no problems. The Gen 1 uppers and lowers are compatible to each other, so it is backwards compatible. I did a video a while ago where I tried to fit my TNA enhanced upper and a standard WK Gen 1 upper that I had borrowed from a friend on this lower, and it was extremely tight. I have since found that a lot of people don't have that problem. I've also noticed that as this rifle has worn in, originally this upper and lower were very tight to each other, and I've noticed that they've kind of loosened up a little bit as the rifle broke in, and even these two are not that tight anymore. It is well known at this point that they are compatible, both the uppers and the lowers. As I say this, True North Arms is selling Generation 2 uppers to fit on Generation 1 lowers for the people who want the reciprocating charging handle, but don't want to go and upgrade all the way to the Gen 2 lower, or the complete Gen 2 rifle. I don't think you have to do that. It's nice to have that kind of flexibility with the rifles if you've got different generations of the rifle. The backwards compatibility is good. Make sure you understand that if you are using the Gen 1 on the Gen 2 or some combination thereof, there are some differences. For example, I think the biggest example is this rear takedown pin is non-existent in a Gen 1 lower. And if you're putting a Gen 1 upper on a Gen 2 lower, you will not be able to use this pin. If you are putting a Gen 2 upper on a Gen 1 lower, the post will have the hole for this takedown pin, but you won't be able to make use of it with your Gen 1 lower. Just make sure you understand that. Also understanding that, this is a captive pin on the Gen 2 here that will work with the Gen 1 upper for the pivot pin, but the Gen 1 is a different type of pin with a E-clip on it, and if you're using a Gen 2 upper, you're still using that E-clip, and you're not getting the standard lower parts. Those go with the lower receiver, and they're not interchangeable with each other. Okay, now let's talk about what I dislike about this rifle. There's not a whole lot, but there are a few things that we definitely have to talk about. The first thing is there is no shell deflector. And I've had several conversations with Kodiak specifically about this, about there not being a shell deflector. It is their opinion that it is quite simply just not needed. At first I was kind of like, yeah, okay, it's not going to be a big deal. However, after having this many rounds through the rifle, you can see it mars it up. That's aesthetic, not a big deal. With steel cased ammo, I've noticed it really takes the finish off, and you can feel it a little bit. I think that if you're shooting a lot of steel ammunition through this, which most people aren't, but if you are, I could see that being a problem on the side of the receiver in the future in terms of, just creating little dents, little pits, that sort of thing. I don't think that it would be a major issue, even with a, drilling and tapping for a plastic or a 3D printed shell deflector on the side, similar to what the MCR did. I don't think that would be a major issue. I would hope that with future generations of this rifle, they would spend the time to mill an integrated shell deflector in here. Some aftermarket shell deflectors do exist. They kind of mount onto the Picatinny rail. You see with this quick attach scope mount that I've got here, I wouldn't even be able to make use of any of the aftermarket shell deflectors that currently exist for this rifle. And I don't think that that's a really good solution anyways. I think it even looks terrible, just, you know, mounting it on the pick rail and having it come over the side for a shell deflector. It is something that I really don't like, and I think it's something that really would need to be corrected in future generations of the rifle. However, for this generation of the rifle, it's not a deal breaker for me. Some magazines over-insert. This has been seen in some of my other tests, my magazine tests, my tests specifically with the Generation 2 Cross Industries mags. But if you put those in there, they will over-insert. So that, again, just an example of the Hera. Here's the Gen 2. They absolutely will over-insert. Now, will they over-insert on a closed bolt? Absolutely not. They will not. So there are things that you can do to mitigate that. And I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. If you're a hunter or plinker, I don't think that that's going to matter to you all that much. If you are a sports shooter, three gun, for example, that could be a little bit of an issue. You do have to be aware of it. And when you insert the magazine quickly, you do have to grab and pull down. Could you develop that as, you know, instinct with practice? Absolutely you could. Should you have to? No, I don't think you should have to. I've been hearing a lot of internet chat about why that's happening. For the record, the Kodiak 180 rifles are not the only ones that are inserting magazines. Other models of the 180 are also over-inserting magazines. For example, I have a Spec 180 lower made by Spectre Limited. It over-inserts this exact same magazines. I've been told that it has something to do with the fact that the magwell on the inside, as it nears the top of the magwell, or the base, whatever you want to call it, whether you want to call it the top or the base of the magwell, it is very boxy and very square. Standard ARs have a little bit of a taper, a little bit of a lip on them to prevent over-insertion. These apparently just don't. Why? I honestly can't say. I don't know why it would be that way. Maybe it was just an oversight. It's not a major issue. Again, it's not a deal breaker for me, but it's something that you need to be aware of. Big difference with the Generation 2 versus the Generation 1. The gas block is all one solid piece. There's no key that fits inside the gas block, followed by a screw to retain that key. You have the gas block, you have the gas regulator, which is extended because the handguard is longer, and then you have the piston. Couple of things to note. I think that the simpler setup is better, not having a key that is fit in by a regulator screw. Just having the one-piece regulator is a good thing. Now, here's the problem. This loosens all the effing time. I have not been able to tighten it tight enough to keep it tight. So you can see when I tighten this, I tighten it as tight as I can, hand tight. And it still is coming loose. I've heard of people using blue Loctite in here. Yeah, absolutely, you can use blue Loctite in here. Do I want to have to break Loctite apart every time I need to take this apart to clean it? Because it does need to be cleaned, you know, fairly regularly. No, I don't really want to do that. I don't believe that I really should have to do that. I do think that the next generation of this rifle absolutely has to have a redesign of the entire gas system. Is it an absolute deal breaker for me? No, it's not a deal breaker for me. But could it be designed better? I believe so. Should it be designed better? I believe so. True North Arms has released an aftermarket adjustable gas regulator. Now you notice it is not extended like the Gen 2 is. I believe this is designed to fit on any of the 180C rifles. So if you're putting this on a Gen 1, you wouldn't want this would stick out past your handguard. Am I going to try this on the Gen 2? Yes, I am. Am I going to have the same tightening issues? I don't know. I hope not. Let's find out. I'll do a video on that in the future. On its face, there should be nothing wrong with this. It's just a solid piston that rides through the block, in through the receiver, through a nylon bushing, hits your bolt carrier, helps cycle your rifle. However, with how thick it is and the tapering here so that the spring will fit on, breakage has been an issue with these pistons in every generation of this rifle, and this one has been no different. I've seen a really good analysis on the Cabbage YouTube channel. I can link to that on below, and he did a really good analysis, much more intelligently and articulately than I could, about why this needs a redesign. He even makes some suggestions about how it could be redesigned, but I do believe it needs to be redesigned. And in addition to that, there seems to be some inconsistency with the rods themselves. I can't say that there's currently an inconsistency, but there certainly has been in the past, it seems. Now, here's why I say that. Some break right at this point here, and they break completely clean. Mine did that. You can see my piston breakage video to see how it broke perfectly clean. That obviously, to me, that indicates that, you know, it was brittle enough so that it wouldn't bend. It just snapped. I've seen multiple other photos and even some videos out there existing on YouTube of pistons that have broken, and they did not snap, they bent. So it appears as though maybe some of these are too brittle and some of them are not too brittle. That's causing a bending versus a snapping. I have no way of proving this. It is just a thought, but it seems a little bit strange that some snap and some bend. I don't know if this is currently a problem. I'm not going to say that it is, but I think the biggest problem with this rifle is still the gas system. Enough to not buy it? Absolutely not. I think piston breakages are reasonably rare. When a piston does break, Kodiak seems more than willing just to send you out another one. I think the customer service on it has been good, but it exists. You need to know. Lastly, this is the nylon bushing right here. I don't know if you guys can see that very well. I'm hitting the camera with my barrel. You can see that my nylon bushing has been marred up. A lot of people replace this nylon bushing with a brass bushing that True North Arms sells. I've done that in previous versions. The current custom build that I have has this done to it. I did it in my Gen 1 180C before I sold it, and coincidentally, I never snapped a piston in my Gen 1 180C. I will say that the block itself, I think, is a definite upgrade. I think the idea of the extended regulator is a definite upgrade. I think that the piston in the next generation of this rifle, hopefully, will be upgraded. You will see here, and I keep hitting my camera, but you will see here that there is this clip on the front of the gas block. In the Gen 1, apparently some people had some issues with the gas block moving forward, creating more space for the piston and causing piston breakages as well. This clip was added to prevent the gas block from moving forward and to prevent it from moving off center. Now the barrel is dimpled so that these two screws will fit into the dimples of the barrel quite well. Supposedly this has fixed the gas block issue, but I never had the gas block move in my Gen 1, and I haven't had it move in my Gen 2. For me, it has absolutely been a non-issue. That kind of sums up the gas system. Is it better than the Gen 1? I think so. Could it still be better yet? I think so. Is it something that people need to be concerned about when considering whether to buy this rifle? I don't think so. I think you need to be aware of what it is, make sure that you're maintaining it properly. You can see, again, I just had this one out yesterday. You know, it got kind of dirty, but I try to keep this as clean as possible. After I'm done this video, I'm going to take this apart again and I'm going to clean it again. And I make sure that this stays tight on a regular basis. Will I try blue Loctite eventually? Maybe. but I'm going to try the adjustable gas block from True North Arms first and see if that solves my problem. So final thoughts, I really like this rifle. I think that most of the redesigns that were done in the Gen 2 were right on the money, and what's left, like the shell deflector, magazines, etc., are for the most part pretty minor. I do think that if Kodiak gets the Generation 3 without a major piston redesign or a shell deflector, that we can be disappointed. But the step from Gen 1 to Gen 2 was no small jump, and it was definitely in the right direction. Given that there's only a few $100s in cost between the Gen 1 and the Gen 2, I think that it's a significant right step and a well-developed upgrade from the Gen 1. Shortly after starting testing my Gen 2, I sold my Gen 1 because I knew I would never really shoot it again. I've also barely used my custom Spec 180C TNA enhanced Generation 1 hybrid rifle that I built shortly before getting the Gen 2 because I've been using the Gen 2 so much. It's worthy of the Gen 2 name, and I would and do recommend this rifle to people looking for a good, mid-priced 5.56 non-restricted rifle. Just monitor the gas system, stay on top of it, make sure it's functioning properly. Should you have some parts on hand? Yes. I'd recommend things like an extra gas piston, and it comes standard with an additional nylon bushing in case you decide to keep the nylon. If you're going to go with the brass, go with the brass. Be careful if you do it. You're on your own if you screw it up. If you're sport shooting, you should keep some extra pins, especially firing pin, retaining cotter pins, maybe a cam pin, and maybe even an extra firing pin. Extra parts are a good idea with other sporting and hunting rifles too, including the AR-15 and other sporting rifles. So this should neither be much of a surprise nor a piss off that you should keep some extra parts around. Either way, Kodiak has been very good with service, so if something does break, contact them first and see what's what. Thanks for watching my review of the Kodiak 180C Gen 2. I've got other 180 platform reviews out already and in the pipeline, so make sure that you like and subscribe for future content.